The following is an exclusive presentation of Optimum Local. It's Optimum or it's not.
The information provided during the following program is not intended as a substitute for medical advice. Personal health concerns should be brought to the attention of your health care provider.
Health Talk is brought to you by Cablevision in association with the Sound Shore Medical Center. Your hosts are Pat Pingatori, a registered nurse and director of the hospital's community relations, and Sal Shalero, director of media relations. Stay up to date on the latest medical topics coming up on Health Talk.
Welcome to Health Talk. I'm Pat Pingatori. Adolescence can be a time of emotional highs and lows. Here today to discuss teen mental illness and suicide is Sharon McCarthy, Program Director for the National Alliance on Mental Illness of Westchester. And joining us later in the program will be Dr. Barbara Bernstein, co-founder and co-chair of the Westchester Putnam Suicide Prevention Coalition. Welcome, Sharon. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Why don't you begin by telling us a little bit about the National Alliance on Mental Illness?
Well, we're a grassroots organization that was established in the 1980s as an affiliate of NAMI National. And what we do is improve the life of individuals with mental illness and their families. We support the families through education programs. We educate the community. And we are committed to seeking better treatment and better medications for people who are mentally ill. And we're working very hard to end the stigma of mental illness.
So tell me a little bit about the specific services that are offered by this association.
Well, we have two education programs for families. One is Family to Family, the other one is NAMI Basics. We have support groups for families. We also have the peer-run recovery support group, which is called NAMI Connections, for those in recovery. We have our speaker series once a month where we bring in people on relevant topics. We send out a monthly newsletter. And we also have a health line in our office to help people with information, resource, and just getting them through the difficult times.
And it sounds like you do a lot of prevention type of things to educate people. And
yes, yes, educate them, though most of the time we get them in the midst of the crisis. So we do try to educate ahead of time, though.
Why don't you tell our viewers how and why you became involved with the Alliance?
I actually became involved with NAMI through a part-time position that I answered. At the time, my daughter had depression. She had been diagnosed in high school, and she was in college, and I happened to be working there, and her symptoms started to escalate. And through what I was learning and talking to NAMI, we began to realize that maybe this was more than just depression. She had an attempted suicide, and at that point they encouraged me to get her reevaluated, which thank goodness they did, because her actual diagnosis was bipolar with anxiety. So that started the road of trying to get medications and treatments that would work for her. It took us a very long time. I took the Family to Family class, which really helped me. But NAMI has really, I say NAMI is part of the reason my daughter's alive today. She's had several suicide attempts, but through the education and information and learning what to watch for, we've been able to be there for her. And I'm glad to say that she's in recovery right now and has returned to school. So she's doing really well. But NAMI really has, I have a group of people that I took the class with, and we get together all the time, and they have been the biggest supporters, helped me through the bad times and the good times.
What is this experience like as a parent? I know that you work there part-time, but as a parent?
As a parent, it is probably one of the most difficult things I've ever gone through. You have constant crisis. You're living on the edge. You're always waiting for something to happen. Why struggling to find the best treatment and medication and support that person through very difficult times. It can be very difficult to deal with the person with mental illness when they're in the midst of it. They're just not thinking straight. You know, we were always on the alert for suicide with my daughter. We still are, always will be. So you live in just constant fear that something's going to happen. And you also, we talk about the stages in Family to Family that you have to go through. And one of them is also grieving. because the person that you thought this person was going to grow into is not going to be that person, and you may have to come to the realization that some of the expectations that we all place may not happen. So it's a real process that you have to go through, and it's very difficult, and you can't do it alone. You just can't do it alone. You know, you need the help, because there's times when you just have to walk away and say, I need to not think about this today, because it's always there.
This has to affect the whole dynamic of the family.
Oh, without a doubt. It definitely affects the dynamics of the family. You know, we have an older son who, when this was first diagnosed, had a terrible time with it, very close to his sister. So it was very difficult for him. He ended up going into therapy and is doing really well with this. But in the beginning, it was very difficult for him to understand who this person was. And for him, he was losing that partner that he thought he was going to have, that friend. Luckily, their relationship, because she's gotten better, is doing really well. But for him, it was also going through that process, and it's very difficult. Everybody takes the brunt of the person's mental illness, so that's part of the problem. So you try to be supportive. When you're being the brunt, you try to support that person. So it is very difficult, and it does affect everybody.
Now, you were, I don't know if lucky is the right word, but you worked for an association, so you knew what resources were available. But that's not for everybody.
No, and that's why it's so important that we try to get the message out, to tell people about us, so that when somebody gets this diagnosis in a family, that they'll call us, and we can start the process of helping them learn what the resources are, what they need to know, the information that you have to keep so that you can get the best care. You know, I was very lucky because I had people there telling me, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to get, this is who you call. You know, very, very lucky, and that's what we try to do, and that's what the family-to-family class really does for families, is give them the information, and also to teach them how to communicate and problem solve, because it's very difficult. You don't know what to do, you don't want to make the illness worse, but you also don't want that person not to become the person they can become, because you're allowing them to manipulate you. So you have to learn a lot of things to get through to dealing with somebody with a mental illness. And you need the support, more than anything, the support of other family members, so you know you're not the only one who's ever gone through this. That's very important.
So this will be a lifelong process for you.
It is a lifelong. It's a chronic illness, so you live with it forever. If you're lucky, you're in recovery, but you always know that there are the chances of relapses, and you have to hope that when those relapses happen, that they can get into a hospital and get stable quick enough. And it's an education for the person with the mental illness too. You know, they need to know. They need to know what they have to do. So you know, while you're trying to educate yourself, you're helping them get educated. But it's there forever, and that's why it's so important to not only educate your immediate family, but everybody outside your family as well. Your friends, your brothers, your sisters. Everybody needs to know what we're dealing with, so that they all can help, you know, and they can all understand. So because it is a lifelong thing. You know, even cousins need to know, because when my daughter has a relapse years from now when we're not here, they need to know what's happening so they can get in there and help her.
Did you have people saying to you, oh, it's just normal adolescence, or, you know, kids act up? And
I definitely did, because it was mother and daughter. Definitely. Everybody was telling me this is a typical mother and daughter, including my own husband for a time, until he finally saw, no, you're right, this is way beyond just mother and daughter. So it really was more me saying, and my husband, our gut feeling that this just wasn't normal, that really pushed us to take her to a psychiatrist and get her checked. And, you know, luckily we did, because at the time when we took her in, the psychiatrist, after meeting with her for 5 minutes, told us she was suicidal and had to be hospitalized. Nothing either one of us realized. After that, we learned what to look for. So we know now, you know, the preventative methods to look for suicide and what to watch for. But prior to that, I wouldn't have known. And we found out all kinds of things. She was cutting. We didn't have any idea, because she was doing it where we couldn't see it.
Explain what that is.
That's where they just do a cut. A lot of times it's on their legs, with maybe knife or even pens. They'll use pens. But it's self-harm, and it can be dangerous. But we weren't aware, because she was doing where we couldn't see it. You know, there were other signs like withdrawal, She had a lot of risky behavior. She definitely was doing some drugs, alcohol, which we were kind of aware of that. We were kind of aware of the alcohol, but not so much the drugs until afterwards. She said she never told us, but she was hearing voices at the time, but she never told us. A lot of anxiety, just very withdrawn, especially when we were at family functions, which was not like her. But I was just thinking, oh, this is a typical teenager just being difficult, you know, and not talking to anybody today. But the truth of the matter is these were all signs of a mental illness. We
have a graphic that's going to go up in a little bit that's going to show some red flags for parents that they need to look for just in case, you know, so they can be aware of this. The graphic's up now. Let's take a look at that. I think you went through most of those changes in behaviors.
I mean, excessive sleeping is one of them. My daughter was sleeping a lot, and I kept thinking, well, that's teenagers, and so did my husband. But we came to find out her sleeping was a way of withdrawing from the situation, not eating. You know, girls, you always think, well, they're always trying to diet. But she really wasn't eating the way she should have been, you know. So, and risky activity is really a big one. You know, change in friendships. She had a big change in friendships when entering high school. You know, difficulties in relationships. All these things which you could say, typical teenager, but if it's over a long period of time, you have to say it's not just typical teenager, there may be something going on.